For this video, what we're going to do is walk you through how you can basically bypass the SharePoint list entirely from the main page, take the user to a request intake form for a project. We're going to cover how to create this project intake form, and the user is never going to see the underlying SharePoint list. The only thing they're going to see is the project request intake form. They'll go through that entire process, and then as soon as they get done with the actual form, it's going to take them right back to the page where the link was. And we're going to explain how to set up both the project request intake form and the link so that they never see the SharePoint list. So on this screen here, you're not seeing the list, you're not seeing anything about it. You went from the home page directly to the form. And when we get done with this form, we're going to go right back to the main page. Now, when working with SharePoint lists and Power Apps, you've got a couple different options. For a SharePoint list, you can come up here and go to the Integrate Power Apps, and then you customize the forms, and then you'll be able to completely redesign the form that comes up when you hit this Add New Item. This is kind of an out-of-the-box setup with all the different fields that you've created, and not exactly a very good-looking form, how it's currently laid out here. Now you could do it this way where you come up here, edit your columns and configure your layout. Here where you use JSON, maybe you hide things and you make them visible. You can do all that as well. But again, you're kind of stuck with this template out of the box approach if you go with this. The other option you can do is you can just create a Power App entirely within the Power App Maker portal, separate from the integrate. When you use the integrate, it's actually creating a connection between the form and the SharePoint list. And it's the only way you can create that direct connection. It's got all the logic for what happens when you hit the add new item and what happens when you save or when you hit cancel. All of that is built into it, as well as when you open this up, it'll open up inside of that form that you create. That integration is specific to using this approach for creating that form. The other approach is, like I said, if you put it in a Power Apps Maker, you can build all that functionality and you basically have an app where you can put it on any page and create a link and go directly to it. So it's basically your own custom app approach. In today's video, we're going to go through how to use the customize form option specifically. Now, the other thing we're going to do at the end of this video is I hate showing people the SharePoint list. I try not to show them the underlying data whenever possible. So I'm actually going to show you how you cannot take them to this form, and after they hit the save button, it won't return back to this list. We'll take them back to the main page where they click the button to create the request instead of seeing this. So the user will never actually see this underlying SharePoint list. I think that's a great touch to make this even more usable for the users of this request form. Now, what exactly am I talking about? So let's go ahead and hit the add new item here, and let's just go and put some test stuff in here. And this is a text field, this is a search field, and then the date will be today, and then we'll do test and this. Again, we don't have to actually fill this out. I didn't make a lot of required fields. Actually, I think most of these are not required. So we'll go ahead and hit save here. And again, we're right back on this page here. I want to take them back to the home page. I don't want them to even have to come here to create the item. I don't want them to see this after they get done hitting the save. So we're going to change all that functioning at the end of this video also. So let's go ahead and delete this. And let's go ahead and customize our form. All right, now if this is your first time in or you haven't actually clicked these will help explain how to use this process. I usually just hit the don't show me this again just so I can bypass this, so I'm going to do that now. Now, I don't actually like using the standard out-of-the-box form. I like using modern controls, but I should preface this by saying modern controls do have a lot of issues. They don't quite work the same way as the classic form. So if you're not comfortable with the potential issues you might have with the modern controls, you can do everything that we're going to do from this point on just using the classic form, but I'm going to change this out. And the first thing I'm going to do is go turn on modern controls. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to change this also. I'm going to change this to landscape and hit apply. And then I'm going to hit the updates here and we're going to turn on modern controls and themes. And we're going to hit close. And then I'm going to go over to our theme, which is turned on when you turn that modern controls on. I'm going to hit add a theme. And I'm going to go ahead and name this Office Solutions Pro. My typical font is Arial. I've heard that it's a little bit better for 508 compliance. If you're trying to get that more accessible form setup, that you go with Arial is what I've been told. So that's what I typically go with, just to make it accessible to everybody. And then I'm going to go ahead and adjust my red, green, and blue inputs here. I typically go with 7, 112, and 184. And let's go ahead and hit create there. And then I want to hit enable to apply this to all the classic controls. It's basically going to update all of the controls that are on here, as well as apply this to all future controls. So let's go ahead and hit the enable here. And you could have hit the don't display this again, especially if you're familiar with that. Now, this is your classic form, and we're not going to actually delete this. But let's go back to the tree view here. It's SharePoint Form 1, and if we look at the different options here, so let's go to advanced. What we're going to see is we've got some stuff in here that we might need for our new form that uses modern control. So what I like to do is just make this not visible. That way I can reference it in the future. So let's go over here to our visibility and set our visibility to off. And then we've got rid of our form. And before we go ahead and add our form, let's just make some changes here. I like to put a background on my forms, and you can put pretty much anything you want. I'm going to show you how you can use PowerPoint to kind of make these look a little bit better, but you could just put an image file back there if you like also, or you could come up with a completely different approach on what you want this to look like. The sky's the limit on what you put on your background here, but I'm going to show you how to do it with PowerPoint. So let's do that quick. Now inside of PowerPoint, what we're going to do is we're going to insert a square block. So let's go over here to shapes, and then let's just draw a shape here. And then we're going to take this up to the corners and fill our screen. And we're going to want to get rid of our borders. So if we go to shape format here, let's get rid of our outline. So no outline. And then let's go ahead and format our shape. So we'll click here. And again, I'm going to change the fill, and I'm going to pick the color. If I go to more colors that I use for my theme. So it's 7, 112, and 184. And then I'm going to hit OK. And then I'm going to go with gradient fill. And I think I'm going to change this. I'm going to go with a radial option here. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. Now you could also adjust all the settings down here, or you could add more colors in here. Really, the sky's the limit, but I think this is a pretty good background. So I'm going to go with that, and I'm going to go ahead and save this as a picture. And I'll just save it in my picture area here. All right, now that we've saved that, let's go ahead and minimize this and go back to our app. And let's go ahead and find our image. So we're going to go to upload, and we found our picture. Let's go ahead and rename this quick. So we'll call it request background. All right, let's select that, hit open, and we want to fill. There we go. Now, the reason why I changed the name is it's going to show as whatever name in here. And if we go over to our media area here, it's a little bit more descriptive than picture one if we rename it. So that's why I went and renamed everything. Feel free to not change it or change it, up to you. It doesn't really matter, but it will show as whatever that is, and it's a little more descriptive of what it's being used for if you do it this way. All right, let's go ahead and add some other items to our screen here. So let's go ahead and add a container. So we'll go with a horizontal container, and that's going to be our top up here on our form. So that'll be kind of up here towards the top. All right, let's go ahead and add another container, but let's go back to our main screen first. We want to add it to the screen, so let's select the screen, and then we'll insert our container. And for this one, let's do a vertical container, and that's going to be our left side. So we'll put that right here for right now. And there we go, fill it like that. We'll resize all these in a few minutes here. Let's select our screen again, and then we're going to add one more container. And for this one, we'll do a horizontal container. For this design, it really doesn't matter what we're selecting. This is going to fill basically all of this space here. Now for this, let's go ahead and set its X to 10, its Y to 10, and then let's change its width here. And we're going to do app.width minus 20. That'll keep it centered in there for us. Height looks good at 100. Now let's go ahead and adjust our left-hand side here. And for this, let's go ahead and do an X of 10 And for our Y, we'll do 120, which is basically our height, 10, and then 10 between it. So we should have essentially a 120 there. And that'll keep us kind of the same spacing for this. And then let's do for a width, I don't know, let's do 240. And then for our height, let's do app.height minus 130, which basically just subtracts our header from it. And then it keeps it, again, just keeps everything nice and spaced correctly. All right, let's go ahead and adjust our main form container here. And for this, our X is probably going to be, let's see, 260. Again, that's just basically getting rid of the information here. And then our 120 for our Y takes into account our header up here. And then for our width, let's go with app.width minus 270. Yeah, that looks, we're just trying to keep everything kind of aligned together here. And then for our height, let's go ahead and adjust that. And for that, we'll do app.height minus 130. All right, so we've got everything pretty much aligned the way we want. Let's go ahead and select all of our items here. So we'll select all three and let's go with extra bold. I think that looks pretty good. Give it a little bit of oomph off the page there. Let's change our border radiuses to 20, give them a little bit more rounded look. All right, that's coming together. That's looking pretty good. Now for this container, let's go ahead and call it our main container. That'll be kind of our main form area, if you will. And we'll call this the left side container. And we'll do this as our top header container. And let's go ahead and just change the orders here. So we'll drag this up there and drag this over here. That way everything's kind of in the right order for this. All right, so let's go ahead and add an image. So let's find an image, and this will be kind of our branding for this, if you will. So let's set our height to 100, and we'll set our width to 100, and then we'll go ahead and find an image. So let's upload. All right, so that's our logo for this form. Again, you can put any images that you want on here. Just make sure that you keep your naming conventions so that if anybody that comes in after you've built this thing can understand what everything is. And let's go ahead and add a text field. And let's go ahead and set our height to our parent.height. And then let's go ahead and set our width to parent.width minus our image logo.width. All right, so now we're filling the available space here. And let's go ahead and put this into the center. And we'll put this in the center here. And let's go ahead and set the font size to 60. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And let's go make it bold. All right, and then we're gonna call this the project request intake. There we go. So that essentially names our form here. And let's go ahead and change our label here. And we'll say this is gonna be our header for the label. Perfect. That's exactly what we're looking for. All right, let's go ahead and add a vertical gallery here. And now this is going to be our side navigation for our form. And let's go ahead and set our minimum height. Actually, that should be fine. Let's go ahead and do our minimum width. We'll do 1. Yeah, minimum height, we'll just make it 1 anyway. And then our template size, let's go with 60. And let's see what we got here. Flexible height. Let's go to here and look for our width setting. And we want to set our width to parent.width. So whatever the container is, this is going to effectively match that is what we're going for. We don't want the gallery to be bigger than the container. So that's kind of why we're making all these adjustments. Let's go ahead and take a look at the items here. Let's go ahead and name our gallery. So we'll call it gallery select area because this is basically our selection for the form. And let's go ahead and we'll go ahead and keep things in here. Again, these are the classic fields. And again, we're going to try to use some modern controls. So let's go ahead and add a text field here. And just for simplicity, so I'm going to show you how to do this. Select the title, and we're going to go ahead and copy this. So if you didn't know how to do this, if this item is selected, then you can just copy this in here before you delete everything, because we're going to delete pretty much everything that's in here. And we're going to go down to our font weight, and we're going to replace this with that logic. And for this, we're just going to say bold. And then for here, we're going to say regular. So it gives you that kind of the hint on what it's supposed to be when you first look at this, because it says regular. And when we select this item, it's going to be bolded. So it's just a good indicator of what's being selected in there. And let's go ahead and do label area selection. And then we can get rid of our next arrows. So we'll get rid of this and this and this. So let's delete those. And there we go. Now let's adjust where this is. And let's go ahead and paste in what we want for this. Now, this is the format. So it's basically table, and then you've got your parentheses, and then you've got your curly brackets and all the different items. Now, in this particular use case, we're going to have basic information. That's going to be our title. And then we've got business need justification, deliverable, resource and timeline estimates, and risk and impact, decision support, and attachments. And then we're going to use the visible property to basically select what we're seeing. Now, we could also use the title, but I wanted to keep it to one word for simplicity. It just makes it a little bit easier. So I added a visible category. You can add other things depending on what you're trying to do with this. Maybe you want to have like a hover over text or something like that. You can do all of those things. All you do is add additional items here and then reference them for your different, whatever you plan on using it for. So, but this is the basic format for a table. I believe if you do a blank gallery, it still gives you kind of the format for this. And we can try that out. Let's go ahead and insert. And we'll do a gallery. And we'll just do a blank vertical gallery. And I guess it doesn't. So it used to, in the past, I thought it used to give you kind of the format for it, but I guess they don't do that anymore. So let's go ahead and delete that again. And you can see here now we've got our different items. So if I select this, what we're going to try to do is change what we're looking at based off what is being selected here. So it's our side navigation for this form and how we access the different areas of the form. All right, now we're pretty much set up for that. Let's go ahead and add our form. So we'll set this form, and for this we'll do our list of demo requested projects. And then it'll start importing all of our fields. Now, most of the times it doesn't import everything. So let's go up to 10 selected. And yeah, there's a bunch of other stuff that hasn't been selected. So let's go ahead and add everything that wasn't selected here. It just makes it a little bit easier if you do this at the beginning. So this is one of our fields and this, and then we're going to want our high-level objectives, our impact areas, our key deliverables, and then let's do the recommendation, resources, risk level, risks of doing nothing, and our urgency. And I believe that is everything. I don't think I missed anything. All right, yep, I think we're good. I think, oh, and attachments. We want to make sure we add our attachments in there. Let's hit add. There we go. Now we've got everything. Let's go ahead and change the order of this. And cascade all these down, make them a little bit easier to work with. And then we're going to change our ordering a little bit here. All right, there we go. We've got it in our order. We may need to adjust this a little bit later on, but for right now, I think we've got this in the correct order. Now let's go ahead and adjust this to 2 columns. And sometimes that will change what we just did, but hopefully we don't have a lot of adjustment there. And then let's go ahead and change this to off. I don't like that reordering everything for me. Sometimes if you're having problems, if you turn this off, it will keep things in the order that you want it to be in. So let's go ahead and do that now. And then let's go ahead and set our minimum height to 1 and our minimum width to 1 also. We shouldn't have to worry about it, but we just want to make sure that we adjust everything just in case. I always set it at 1. You could set it at what you actually think the minimum is here, but if you're changing your settings based off of scaling or something like that, you will want to adjust these to make sure that it fits the screen correctly. All right, so I think we're pretty well set for this. Now what we want to do is basically unlock all of these different fields. So, and then we're going to change our name also. So if we'll just copy this, and for simplicity, we're just going to make it 2, just to make it easy. And let's go ahead and expand this. Now we can, if you hold down the Shift key and then you select these, you can select all of them very easily. Unfortunately, you can't shift select and like go all the way to the bottom and select everything. You have to select them one at a time here, but this is a great way to select everything, and we're going to unlock all of them at one time. So if we go over to here and we're going to hit the unlock button. Now the reason why we wanted to get everything on here to begin with is as soon as we unlock it, it essentially allows you to add it again, and we don't want it to be confused and make sure that we don't add it twice. So now that we've got everything that we wanted in here, we don't have to worry about trying to add something and add in a duplicate. So if we go back to, just to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about here, if I go to edit fields, you're going to see that all the things that I've already added are back on here because we've unlocked them. It doesn't know for sure exactly how we're using it. Maybe we need to add it again. So it's going to give us all these options again, and we don't want to add it twice. So that's why we do that as the step 1 is just get everything on the form. Now that we've got everything on the form, now we can actually get everything kind of set up the way we want it to. So we want to adjust our visibility so that when we select these things on the left navigation here, it filters this. So let's go ahead and select this one. And we'll select these first 4. I think that's good for the basic information. We're going to adjust our visibility here. And we're going to say gal selected area dot selected equals, or actually dot visible equals basic. And then when we select it, it's going to show those 4. So let's do the next one just as an example here as well. So we'll select our strategic alignment, our business problem, and our expected benefits right here, and our risks. Let's go ahead and select the risk of not doing this. And for this one, we'll do gal selected area dot selected dot visible equals need, and then it'll filter those. So now if we look at our basic information, we're going to see those. And if we see our business need, then we're going to see those. So that's essentially what we're trying to do with this, is set it up like that. We want to select our high-level objective. So let's find our high-level objective in here. There we go. And then we want to do our key deliverable. So again, the shift key, and we'll find our key deliverable. And we'll set our visible. We'll go ahead and paste. And we'll call this our deliverable. All right. And now let's do our resource and timeline estimates in here. And for that, it'll be our estimated budget, our estimated duration, and then also our dependencies and our resources needed. All right, so those 4. And we'll select visible. And let's go ahead and select this. And again, that was resources. And then we'll go ahead and do our risk and impact. And for this one, let's go ahead and select our change management and then our impact areas. And then we'll do our risk level, and I think we'll put the risk of not doing the project in here also. So let's go and find our risk of not doing it right here and set our visibility for this one to risks. I think that makes sense to put those all together. And let's go ahead and do our decision support. And for our decision support, we'll have our urgency, and then we'll also have our actual recommendation from the requester. So just those 2 fields, and we'll select the visible, and we'll paste that in as decision. All right, so now we've just got the attachment field. So let's go ahead and select that. And we have our attachment. It's the only thing we haven't adjusted, so that's why it's showing up there, but we do want to make sure that we adjust this in here. and we'll call that attachment. All right, there we go. So now if we try this, we hit the basic information, we've got our 4 items. Our business need, we've got our 3 items. We did have 4, but we moved one of them over to the risk area. I think that makes more sense to put it there. And then we'll go ahead and put our deliverables, and it's on 2 different lines, so I'm going to show you how to fix that also. And then we do our resource estimates. Again, kind of a weird layout here for the lines. And we've got our risk impact here, and we've got our decision support and our attachments. So our navigation is working correctly. And you'll notice this is a little bit different formatting here. The attachment field is kind of the only thing that's really just completely on the classic side. And to be honest, I kind of can't stand the attachment field. It doesn't work for most things that I try to do, especially like Dataverse stuff. It's just incredibly painful to use for Dataverse stuff. But we're going to adjust the look on this to kind of match the rest of what we've got going on here later on. So let's go back to our basic information. So how do we fix some of these other ones further down where we get this weird spacing here? Let's go to basic information, and we're going to adjust all of these. So let's go ahead and adjust, select our title, and let's go shift, and we'll find our project sponsor, our requester, and our date submitted. And we're going to change our width to be parent.width and divide it by 2. Now that doesn't really fix our issue. That's just more of making sure that everything stays on the same line. You could also adjust, like say for example, the title to be a little bit bigger and your project sponsor a little bit smaller. If you think that the title needs that more space, you could do all of those kinds of adjustments here also if you wanted to. In this particular video, I'm not going to focus on a lot of that stuff. I'm just going to help you kind of fix the general flow of your form here. But that looks good for this. But now while we've got it, let's go ahead and adjust our X and Y for these. So if we select title and we select our project sponsor and we go down here to our X and our Y. Now the X is essentially 0 or 1. In this particular case, we want to make sure that the Y is the same, and they are. So it's at 0, so that's what we're looking for. And if I look at the title, we should expect to see a 0 here for the X and a 1 for our other item. And that's exactly what we're seeing, which is perfect. But the Y is really what we're concerned about. So if we select our requester, for example, we want that to be 1. So let's go ahead and select our requester, and then we're going to select our date submitted. And we're going to take a look at our Y and make sure it's 1. And it is. Perfect. That's exactly what we want to see. Let's go ahead and go to our next one. So we'll go to our business need justification, and we want this to be 3. So both of these should be on our line of 3. So let's do strategic alignment and our business problem. Select both of those and go down to our Y. And we see that it's 2. So the first tab had 0, 1, and this one has 2. So that's exactly what we expect to see. And if we go to our expected benefits here, we should expect to see a Y of 3, which we do. So that's exactly what we're expecting. Now, if you were to rearrange these, essentially, let's say you wanted the business problem before this, after the strategic alignment, you would just change this to 0 and this to 1, and that would realign where everything is. Now let's go to our deliverables. And this is the first time we're essentially in the wrong order. So we want both our high level. So we'll go to our high level objective, and then we'll go to our key deliverable and select both of those. And then we want the Y for this one to be the same because they're going to be different. So it's going to be blank. And this should be essentially our number 5. So that'll keep everything on the same line. And you could have rearranged this if you wanted to, but I think that's fine. So we'll go on to the next one. So this is line 5, so we should be in line 6 and 7 here. So let's go ahead and select this. And our estimated budget and our estimated duration should probably be on the same line. So we'll do this one and this one, and that'll be a Y of 7. Or maybe it's 6. Let's try 6. No, that doesn't feel right. It should be 7. Line of 7. And if we go back to our deliverables, just to make sure that we're doing everything correctly here, we have a Y of 5. So we actually did mess up. So this should be 6. So we'll select this again, and we'll make this 6. Now, our dependencies and constraints, And in our requests, or our resources needed, so we'll find our resources needed. These should be on line 7. So we'll put that on line 7. And there we go. So we got line 6, line 7. And again, you could rearrange these if you wanted to. Let's go to risk and impact, and this one will start at 8. So we'll have our change management needed, and our risk level, I think is our change. So we'll have our change management needed and our impact areas. So let's find our impact areas over here. There we go. And this, and that'll be 8. And then if we choose our risk level and our risks of doing nothing, we'll change the Y to 9 for this. And for this, I'm going to rearrange things. So let's make our risk level X of 0. And then we'll make our risks of doing nothing. If it hasn't adjusted, we'll make that 1, just so we can hardwire it to go exactly where we want it to go. So we've got our 9 done. And let's go ahead and do our decision support. And we'll select our urgency and then our recommendation from the requester. And let's set this to 10 for our Y. And we'll do our attachments. And there we go. Everything's good for our attachments. Now let's go ahead and fix this. The font here is 21. Now everything else in here is 14. Again, like I said, this is the classic control, so the old style. So the fonts actually work a little bit different here. So 14 here is going to look too big, right? So this is actually a little bit too big. This is 14 over here. So let's go ahead and go with 12, a little bit smaller. And let's replace this. So let's go with a text field. And let's go ahead and put this up here. Now, what I like to do is look at how a different one is set up. So we'll look at this one. And this one has an X of 24 and a Y of 10. And again, there's that font size of 14. So we're going to emulate that. So we've got 24 and 10. Let's go back to our attachments. And then we'll select this new field that we created. And we'll put that at 24 and 10. So it's in the same relative placement as everything else. And let's go ahead and change our width. It's usually parent.width minus 48 a lot of times. And let's go ahead and put that in the middle. There we go. So it's kind of in the center. And let's go ahead and change this to parent.display name. All right, so we've got that where we need it to be. Now, what do we do with the old ones? So this right here, what I usually do is just replace it. It saves me having to do a lot of stuff when all the errors pop up. So if I delete this, you're going to see you're going to get a bunch of errors. So let's just rename this and match what we had there. And that'll get rid of most, if not all, of the errors that pop up, and problem solved. All right, so let's go back to our basic information here. Now, one of the things I want to do is I want to make these pretty much all required fields. And you can see right now they're false. Now, you may want to make only some of them required or none of them required. It's kind of up to you. Whatever you make required is going to be required for them to actually hit the save button. And for something like this, for a project request, I tend to think that pretty much everything is required. So we're going to go ahead and let's make this a little bit bigger here. And let's go ahead and select everything. So we're going to select this one, pretty much everything except for the attachment field. Attachments typically are kind of an optional thing, so we'll go ahead and leave that the way it is. But everything else I'm going to make required for this form. So let's go ahead and select all of them except for the attachments, and then we will make all of this true. And you'll see that we get the asterisk now that indicates that it's all required stuff. So if we go through each of the different screens here, we should see an asterisk on all of them. And it looks like that worked. Looks like we didn't miss anything. So everything is now a required field for this form. Now let's go ahead and change some of the names for some of these fields. All right, so for this one, let's go ahead and call this project title. And for this, let's give them some specific guidance. So we'll say project sponsor just like it had, but we're going to say department or whatever organizational way that you want to do that. That's what you would essentially put in there. Maybe you want it to be at a, whatever organizational element you want them to put in there, you would specify that here. Alternatively, if you know exactly what organizations you want to have populate this box, you could just make this into a choice or a lookup field and solve that way. That way you don't get any weird spellings and that kind of stuff. But for this use and for this video, I'm just kind of showing you how to do just a text field for that. And then let's go ahead and adjust this field. So we don't want it to say find items. We want it to say select requester maybe. So let's go ahead and find items. And we're going to change that to select the requester. And then for this one, we actually have to change this. This is one of those fields, whenever you're going to a lookup, you run into problems using modern controls with a combo box. It just doesn't work out of the box. You need to make some adjustments here to make this work. And all we need to do is modify this a little bit. But what I always like to do is copy this. And I always like to keep the original. What was here right when I started this process off, I always put that here so that if I ever have any problems, I can always revert back to this. Sometimes with the controls, Microsoft does make changes and things that were working stop working. It's kind of annoying, especially since they don't really tell you what they're changing and what's going to break when they do it. But they do that, so just be aware of that. But we're going to need to add something to this. Out of the box, it doesn't work. Again, this is one of those weird things. Why would Microsoft make something available that just doesn't work? But it doesn't. So we need to modify this. And all you have to do is type in there self.search text. And what this is fixing is if I was to play this form the way that it is right now, it would come up blank. There would be nothing there. No people would populate in the box. Alternatively, sometimes it might work, but it'll be limited to the first 500 to 800 people. And if you have an organization that's got thousands upon thousands of employees, you're not going to get the full list. It's only going to search roughly 800-ish, maybe. The old limit was about 500. I think right now it's at 800, but you're not going to get the full list is kind of the key thing. So by adding this in there, you'll be able to search the full list of all the people that are out there. So you do want to make this change here, and then you'll have to do something very similar for other combo boxes that you have, especially if you're going to have more than 500 options or 800 or 1,000. If it's going to be a lot more than that, you are going to want to adjust the logic so that you can search the full list of what you've provided. All right, let's go ahead and look at our select date here. And you can make some adjustments here. So if we wanted to, we could go with a short or a year month. I'm just going to keep it as long abbreviated, but you do have options. If you like the short date format, you can go ahead and change that. Or if you're only concerned with the year month, you can go ahead and change that. Other things you possibly could do here is let's adjust our start. So the end date is basically today plus 100, but maybe we need to adjust our start. So let's go ahead and adjust that. So we'll go down and find the start here. And we just want this to be now. So basically you can't put this before today. It's got to be date submitted of today. So it limits them. You could also change the start of the week if you want it to be like Monday. You could put that in there as well. And if we go ahead and hit the play on this form here, well, right now we're in essentially a form that you can't edit. We could change this to display a new form, and then we could actually adjust this form a little bit. So if we go to new, let's go play, and now we can see that I can't pick anything before the 24th, which is the date that I'm recording this video. So you might want to adjust that, or if you want it to be a specific date range, maybe you don't need the length of time, because obviously it's date created should be just today. So you could limit the start and the end to just today's date. So you give them essentially just that one option instead of putting it in the future. So that's one of those things that you could customize on this form here. And let's go ahead and select this, and let's go ahead and put that back at edit. All right, so now let's go ahead and I think we're good with that. Let's go to our business need and justification area. Let's go ahead and adjust here. And again, this one will just say, I don't know, business problem and maybe an opportunity. Maybe you want to sell it as an opportunity. And our strategic alignment. You might, in this case, want to give some examples. So you'd put like a little info button here and provide them, information on how to pick a strategic goal, or maybe you want to provide specific information about the strategic goals. You provide them a link to the strategic goals so they know what these things are. And again, these are just the things I threw in there. For you, it would be whatever you use to kind of guide your production of different tools, because a lot of this stuff costs a lot of money. So I've worked at organizations where they said, if it doesn't align to a strategic area, we're not paying for it. So it's got to be something that meets the mission of what we're trying to do. And that's really what this does, is it kind of focuses, hey, if it doesn't fit this, then maybe it's not worth the money to do right now. So that's kind of what a lot of organizations will use this for. And then let's go ahead and take a look at our expected benefits. Let's go ahead and just a small adjustment here. So we'll just say expected benefits slash value. And actually, let's go back to basic information for a second here. Nope, that looks good. But I do want to adjust these. I want to make this a little bit bigger. Let's make that 300. Almost forgot about these text fields. So for this, let's go ahead and change our height. We'll do I don't know, parent height minus 64. And essentially these are 32, so I'm just kind of doubling that. Technically, it should be a little bit further if I wanted to find the exact format here, because we're a little bit off the top here. So if you wanted to kind of match where the placement of this is right here, then you would do that. So for example, if I look here, well, that one's going to adjust. This gap here is a little bit bigger than this gap here. So if you were trying to get it perfect, you would adjust this a little bit more, but I kind of think that looks fine the way that it is. And we want to adjust our find items here. So we don't want that to say that. So let's go with select strategic goal. And again, this will make 300 again. So I tend to keep things kind of the same, but you could adjust this based off of how much text you allow them to put in this thing. And again, we'll do the same thing here. Parent.height minus 64. And oh, I forgot to do this in the last one. We want to do multi-line. So let's do that while we're doing this. Again, this is all the stuff that Modern Controls doesn't adjust. Like these are multi-line fields inside of the SharePoint, and it doesn't really adjust for that when you put it into the modern form. The classic form is usually a little bit better at picking this stuff up than the modern form. So, but it's just a look thing. I kind of like the look of a modern form over the classic. But let's go ahead and look at our deliverable. And these are both going to have let's go ahead and select both of these because they're both going to be 300. So these two, and then we'll make the height 300 for both. And then we'll do our height minus 64. Let's go ahead and copy that because we got a lot of text fields that we'll need to adjust here. So there we go. And again, multi-line. If you didn't adjust this and you go to play the app, what you're going to see is it's going to be kind of centered text here instead of going to the very top of the field here. So that's kind of your visual indicator that you might have missed one of these. And I miss them all the time. Again, I've got my mindset on certain things and I can't obviously select the actual controls and just kind of fix them all at the same time, unfortunately. But so I do tend to skip things every once in a while. And then let's go ahead and change our estimated duration. So we'll select, instead of find items, select duration. And then we'll do our adjustment here. So we'll say select estimated budget. And then we'll adjust the height of this. So we'll say 300. And then we'll do the same thing here, 300. Oh, it adjusts automatically for when I did this one. So let's adjust the height. Multi-line. And our height here. And then we'll do the same thing for our risk impact. All right, this is the last area. I just go ahead and skip ahead a little bit. And for this one, we're going to make the width a little bit different. We're going to do parent.width so that it fills the entire area. All right, so that is adjusted for everything. And I did go through and just kind of make a couple of small adjustments to the order of some of the stuff. but for the most part, that is what we're looking for on this. Now you could also go through and make adjustments. Maybe you want to see change management at the beginning and you want to do risk at the end. You maybe just change the name of this. Those are all things you could adjust on this also. I think this looks pretty good though. We've adjusted all of our placeholders here. You could add placeholders to these text boxes also if you're looking to give them specific guidance and kind of what is being looked for. And for that, you would just kind of select this and search for PL and you'll see placeholder. You'll see by default, most text fields have that as blank here. And you can also adjust it here on this screen here. So if you want to put your placeholder text in here, and again, this might be specific guidance on what you're looking for again. And then for the attachments, some other things you can adjust here. If we select the attachment field, you can select the number of max attachments and max attachment sizes. If you want to adjust these, you can do that as well. And if you do adjust these, or if you just want to give some information, you might want to add another text field in here or add something at the end of this that says max of 6 attachments. And we'll just go ahead and do that. It's max 6 attachments of 10 megabytes each. And then it'll add that in there. So let's go ahead and do this just to make it a little bit cleaner. And we'll put it like that. So now we've got that information in there. Now, if you wanted it bold, you could also put some bold characters in here to make it stand out as bold, or just create it as a separate field. That way you can add the bold to the field specifically. But that is pretty good there. That gives them some specific guidance on kind of what they're looking for and what the max and the max sizes are. Feel free to adjust those right here also. All right, so we go back here. I think everything's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and hit save up here. And we're going to add version notes. So this is following all of the modifications to the new form using modern controls. That way, when you're looking at the versions, this information will be there. That way, if you need to roll it back or hit undo, basically, if something doesn't work, you've got that as a kind of your when did you hit save for this. And then what we want to go through, we don't want to publish right now. We could, but we're not quite ready to publish. Let's go ahead and make this a little bit bigger over here. And if we go up here, let's make this screen is fine. All right, let's go ahead and collapse everything. Okay, so if we look at the SharePoint form here, what we want to do is we need to replicate some of this information on our new form that we created. So if we go to the main container here, let's collapse this. We want to put this information over from the SharePoint form 1 into our SharePoint form 2. So let's go back here and let's grab this on success and we'll put that into the on success here. And let's go back over here and we want the item property. So let's go ahead and copy this and put that in our item property. And if we go back and look, I believe that's everything. Yep, that is everything that we need to get. I do want to adjust one other thing. I'm not a big fan of the solid on this, so let's go ahead and go with none. Same thing with the gallery while we're at it. So let's go ahead and change that also. All right, so that basically just gets rid of that border on the outside here when you select that. I'm not a huge fan of that border. I think it doesn't look very good, so I typically get rid of that. So let's go back into here. So now we've adjusted essentially what we need to from the form, but we also need to adjust our integration here. So if we go to this, we want to make sure this is the correct form. So it'll be number 2. This adjustment here for each one of this. That way, essentially, we're using only the new form that we've created. And this is how you could roll things back if you run into a bunch of problems, is you would essentially just change these back to 1 and then make SharePoint form 1 visible again. And you could basically undo all the things that we just did, should you want to do that. Now, one other thing we want to take a look at, again, these modern controls, combo boxes with lookups are kind of a pain. Let's go ahead to the display here and we want to edit this. So let's go ahead and edit this and we'll go ahead and add a field and we want the display name. Hit add and then it'll add the name that's been selected there. All right, so I think we're just about ready. So let's hit save. Now, one other thing we might want to take a look at, if we select the gallery here, we could adjust this a little bit more. So the bolding is good, but we could also just change the look of the fill. So if we go to template fill here, and again, I typically put this at the bottom if I'm modifying it, just in case I screw things up. But if, again, this item is selected, then we want to go ahead and put in maybe app.theme.colors.lighter 30 maybe, and then we'll go ahead and do RGBA 0, 0, 0, and 0. And we get a little bit of a darker effect. So if we go ahead and try that out, it'll just draw attention to the difference there a little bit more. So I think that looks pretty good if we do that. Again, you could adjust this. You could also just change the background font color. So again, we were talking about 5-way compliance. Now, that dark black with that darker color, not a big contrast there. So maybe we change that to, like, say, white. And you would essentially use the exact same approach here, where you would use black if it's not being selected, and then maybe white or some other color to kind of just draw attention to it again. But you could do something like that also for this. And if we go ahead and look at everything, I think we're pretty good. So let's go again and save and publish. There we go. Now let's go back to SharePoint. Now back in SharePoint, let's go ahead and refresh our page here. If we hit add new item, might not be done publishing. Nope, it is. We can now see our form that we created. Let's go ahead and close this out again. Now, what we wanted to do is put it on our home page. So how do we set it up so that we can access it from our home page instead of doing it from here and giving them access to the full SharePoint list? I typically, like I said, don't like having them access the full SharePoint list. So I like putting links on the main page and not letting them into the list itself. Most SharePoint users don't understand how to use SharePoint. So if you if you don't give them access to the SharePoint list, they typically don't go looking for it so they can access it. And it's just a little bit cleaner and user-friendly approach for people that are coming to your SharePoint page just to see the form through a button of some sort. But how do we set that up? So to set this up, what we're going to do is click Add New Item, and we're going to go copy this link. Let's copy that. And let's go to a new web browser. And I'm going to paste it into the bar up here. All right, so it's doing, this is exactly what we're looking for, is essentially to open up another web browser page here. So we're going to go ahead and copy this link up here. And then we're going to open up Notepad. Now in Notepad, let's go ahead and paste this. And we'll call it the form link. Now we also need our portal page. So we need to go back to our portal and get the actual portal page. So let's go back there now. All right, so now this is our home page. So we're going to go ahead and copy the link for this and then go back to our Notepad. All right, so now we've got all the link information. And now we're going to add another space here for final version. Now what we need is we want this first portion. So this is our starting point. So let's go ahead and copy that. And then what we're going to need is we need to type env equals embedded and source equals HTTPS the %, 3, and then alpha // and then we're going to copy from this side here and paste that over here. So let's make sure we spelt everything correctly. Embedded source equals %3 alpha. This is the key part right here. So this is our form link, and where we want it to go afterwards is here. So let's go ahead and copy this link as our final and go back to our SharePoint portal. Now on our SharePoint portal, let's go ahead and edit this. Again, I haven't really done anything with this page. We're going to be building this on this channel. So this is just kind of the first part here for building this. Let's go ahead and add a section quick here, and we'll just call it a one column for right now. And let's go ahead and add a web part, and we'll do buttons. So let's go ahead and add a button, and let's go ahead and edit this button here, and we'll say project request intake. And we'll put a link on here, and there we go. So now we've got a button for our project request intake that anybody comes here will see. And we might adjust this. Again, this entire page is probably going to change quite a bit as we build this portal out. This is just kind of the starting point for this. Let's go ahead and publish. And there we go. So let's go ahead and test this out and see if we get the effect that we're looking for. So we'll hit this. It opens up our form, and this will be a good test just to see if it actually works. So if I try to hit save, because I've got all these required fields now, it should give me an error. Yes, and basically if I go to every page, it's going to have an error for everything being required. So we'll just call this test, and we'll say, yep, and our search works, so it's finding me or anybody else. Our date submitted, we've only got today because it's the current date. And then we go to our business justification, we'll say test, strategic, test, deliverable. Again, we're just kind of testing this thing out, so it doesn't really matter what we're putting in here. And keep doing this for every page. And we'll say yes for this. Now, choice columns for yes and no, it's one or the other. So default, I typically put it as no, and then the user's got to actually switch it. Otherwise, it will be just no by default. And we'll do test. And I'm not going to attach any attachments. It's not a required field. So if we hit save, what we should see at this point is it takes us back to our other page after saving. And there we go. So at this point, the user never sees the SharePoint list. So we succeeded in what we were trying to do. And same thing if you hit the cancel button here, it should take them back to our home page. There we go. So exactly what we were shooting for is how we got this thing set it up. Now, if we go take a look at the SharePoint list, what we're looking for, let's refresh this page. What we're looking for is, did our test save? And there we can see it. And everything looks correct. So essentially, everything is working the way that we expected it to. The page interaction is working the way we want, so the user never needs to come here, never has to see this. This could be the back end where the people that maintain this and actually process these, they come in here and they work with it. And you'll notice that I didn't give the user a status column. By default, I've got it set for submitted. So essentially the people that are monitoring or maintaining this will come in here and change the status of this to whatever the next one is, processing, under review, deferred, whatever the next process is. And you can actually build an app for interacting with this also, so you never have to interact with the actual SharePoint list. You do everything from an app interface, giving you a lot more flexibility and capability. Now, on the build of this, I did create a couple of views, so I can click processed, and I can see everything that's been processed and everything that's in processing if I want to by just clicking a button. So you can do those kinds of modifications to the actual SharePoint list, or you could build it all straight into an app. So you, again, lots of flexibility on how you set this up. Now, if we go back to our home page, the question you might be asking yourself is, okay, I've submitted it. As a user, how do I see what's going on with it? Well, we're going to cover that in a different video. Hopefully you found this content helpful. Until next time.